so far. They still have to have time to really look at it, and you know, it's a very big document. It's got a lot of nuances that you have to look and understand. They have to look at the changes that we made. We prioritize funding for education, and for parts of education that we thought were really, really important, such as the Friskies, the Family, Youth, and Resource Centers. We tried to reinstate funding that the governor had reduced in some of those type of extended school service programs. But there's really not a lot of money to work with, and it's a very, very tight budget, and so we did the best we could do.
Well, there always seems to be some snag that holds up the budget, or at least in the past sessions. Do you have any idea what that might be? I mean, last year, or the last budget cycle, the Senate proposed across-the-board cuts. Are you hearing any rumblings that that might be the case this time?
Not yet. There's always been some indication from the Senate that they think across-the-board cuts are the best way of dealing with having to further reduce the budget. The House has always taken the position that prioritizing spending is the best way of handling the budget. And so, but this time there's just not any increase in spending anywhere, and we did have a balanced budget, and so we'll just have to see what they do. We're really unsure yet what direction they'll take.
Well, when you all got the budget, and you're looking at this, everybody was saying, well, there's not a whole lot of money to work with. There's not a whole lot of options there.
Right.
I mean, when you got the budget from the governor, did you think, well, this is pretty much pretty okay?
Well, we looked at the budget, and we looked at where he had increased spending, and we really worked hard and studied those issues very hard. You know, in the House, about 70% of our membership is involved in some form of the budget, either serving on a budget subcommittee, or there's 30+ members that are on the full Appropriations and Revenue Committee. So most of those members, and then the 5 members of House leadership and 3 members of Senate leadership are 3 members of Republican leadership are also very involved. So, you know, over 70% of the folks are involved as you start to look at the budget process. And what we found was we looked first at the programs that the governor had increased.
So social workers, $21 million.
Right.
You all kept all that. The preschool, funding more low-income preschoolers.
We half funded that because we felt it was an expansion of a program, a good program, no doubt about that. The governor has a strong advocacy for preschool and wanted to continue that and promote that. But we also felt like there were some other programs that had been cut more than they should have been, and so we actually reduced some of his new spending and redirected that into current existing programs.
But there's still about $7.5 million for preschool funding.
Still $7.5 million for preschool funding, and that always is a potential target for the Senate to remove.
Well, one of the biggest changes that you all did make to the governor's proposal was reducing the debt, which was already pretty low compared to the debt level for this next two years. Was already pretty low compared to the last few budget cycles.
That's correct.
What was your thinking there? Was this a preemptive strike for both the elections, where debt might be an issue, and for what the Senate might do to the budget?
Well, I think we first looked at the debt. There's 2 different types of debt. One form was debt that the state has no debt service requirement for. We're not obligated for it, but yet it counts toward our bonded indebtedness that's been authorized. And that's basically the university agency bonds.
Right, because they sometimes have fees,
Sure.
like dining hall fees,
That's
which
correct.
would pay for those projects, but yet it still counts toward the total cap.
It counts toward the total cap because it's debt that we authorize. That debt we removed, and we felt like it's still worthy. A lot of those projects are still very, very worthy, but they would be best handled in a conference committee to where we could find out how our Senate colleagues felt about that debt. We'd have more time to study it. We started to actually pursue information from the universities on how much could they actually issue in this biennium coming forward. A lot of times universities have put a lot of agency debt requests in because they have to pick and choose. They don't have the flexibility to make the decisions on which project is ready to go, and trying to look forward 24 months is very, very difficult for them.
So they're saying, we're planning for all these projects, you tell us which ones we can go forward
That's
on.
right. And what they do is they have to get authorization from the General Assembly, and so they'll ask for authorization for everything, knowing that they're only going to be able to issue maybe 2 or 3 of those, or certainly a fraction of what they've asked for, because they don't have the revenue sources, they don't have the housing, dining fees, they don't have parking lot rentals coming in, to do them all. So, but because the state's process of making them come to us and give them authorization, that has always made the state's debt look greater than what it is.
So you all are going to be negotiating, you expect to negotiate with the Senate about that once it comes to the conference committee?
I do.
Meanwhile, the Senate has sent you all a bill that would cap the amount of debt. Is that going to do anything?
We're going to start looking at that. We're actually going to have hearings on it and look at that bill. There is a number of things that are a little concerning in the way that the Senate did their proposal. For example, well, in that debt figure, they don't count road debt. Now, that's debt that we obviously are having to take taxpayer dollars from to pay for. They also didn't include Kentucky Infrastructure Authority debt, which is debt that we issue to do water and sewer projects with. They exempted that. They did not include university agency bonded debt. But on the other hand, the Senate for years and years and years has refused to even consider legislation that the House has passed, which I've sponsored 5 years running, that says this university debt is not state bonded indebtedness, should not count toward the state's bonded indebtedness, and the state has no obligation to pay. And for 5 years in a row, they haven't adopted or even had a hearing on it, but yet they send us their #1 priority bill, Senate Bill 1, and it exempts all that debt from the calculation. So there's a lot of things in Senate Bill 1 that we're going to really look at and try to study, and before we pass something just as a feel-good piece of legislation that is political driven, by the way, it could be not withstood anytime we wanted to exceed that.
And I talked to the sponsor, Joe Bowen, about that. I mean, you all could, the notwithstanding, you all could make the exception every budget.
We can make the exception every session. So I think all of that is important, that we have a discussion on what really makes states debt. For example,
well, real briefly, before you get to that, on the road fund and the universities, could they have been exempted because they have dedicated revenue streams? The road fund gets a lot of money from the gas tax, and then, of course, we've talked about the universities. Is that why they were exempted?
We're not sure why they exempted them.